Viewer discretion is advised. The following content may contain material that some viewers find disturbing or offensive. While we strive to create content that is informative and engaging, the topics discussed today touch upon sensitive subjects. We believe in open discussion and exploring complex themes, but we also understand that certain content can be challenging for some individuals. Your well-being is our priority. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to click away. We encourage you to proceed with caution and take care of yourself. For those who choose to continue, thank you for joining us in this important conversation. We appreciate your viewership and encourage you to follow our channel for more thought-provoking content.
By the last breath of public law, then raise your ears. CCP does not equal Chinese. Software was tampered with. Election systems linked to Chinese manufacturing. Take down the CCP.
Drawing from newly released intelligence, Trump laid bare how Beijing exploited vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure through hacking, data theft, and coordinated influence operations.
Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press.
And what's interesting is the left saying, well, we were actually in control of those agencies at the time, but the problem we always have with the deep state, which is exactly what it is that when you come in and have politicals in charge, you have people who are career bureaucrats underneath who really cause they have a lot of power to keep things from you and to do things they shouldn't do.
He connected the dots to the engineered chaos of 2020, where a virus from China conveniently locked down the country, eroded election integrity, and paved the way for stolen data to install a compliant puppet regime.
We also received testimony from multiple intelligence community whistleblowers who reported retaliation for challenging the intelligence community's manipulation of intelligence on the virus's origins, once again revealing a clear pattern of suppressing dissent, silencing critics, and burying the truth.
NSA analysts openly admitted chopping up assessments and downgrading intelligence to bury links between Beijing's activities and the 2020 contest, even as the FBI under Director Wray drew an absolute red line against including dissenting views that China had indeed meddled.
And this was, Katie, like a massive effort, what they call a multi-domain operation. That means trade, it means diplomacy, it means open source information, it means social media. So all the levers of power China had to influence the U.S. election. So there was clear evidence of political and personal bias, and intelligence is supposed to be neutral. So what we heard tonight from the president is an allegation that this intelligence was suppressed in order to harm him, and now we're seeing documents already which back up those claims.
The other thing that we blocked yesterday was the SAVE Act, right, which was literally allow this administration to rig our democracy so that it would be hard for any Democrat in any state to win any election.
There you have Senator Alyssa Slotkin, nominally from Michigan, but really channeling her CIA training, admitting that her party can't win if the U.S. adopts the kind of voter identification laws that most of the other civilized nations in the world use.
We know that the Justice Department's compromised. We know they don't prosecute the Epstein stuff. We know that the Trump administration is deep in the swamp. But on the issue of the 2020 election being stolen, the evidence is overwhelming. And China, working with the CIA and others, that's in the emails that have been released. We knew it back at the time. The FBI, the CIA, NSA, they all sat there and said, we're going to cover this up. We're going to block this. We're not going to let the public or Trump or anybody know. They knew before the election, during, and after what happened. So it's about our right to vote. It's about the coup over this country.
Burn bags stuffed with damning 2020 fraud evidence hidden in safes and obscure offices point straight back to directives from the Obama administration, with figures like Brennan and Clapper orchestrating the suppression.
Barack Obama can now be summoned before a grand jury. He cannot take the Fifth Amendment because he has immunity from prosecution. He'll have to tell the truth. If he lies as a private citizen about what he did as president, he'll no longer have that immunity. And that is a trap that Obama is sitting potentially facing.
This wasn't incompetence, and it wasn't organic. It was a coordinated effort to protect a foreign adversary's gains while gaslighting the American people about the most secure election in history. John Bound reporting for the Alex Jones Network at alexjoneslive.com.
Alex, Iran is not a worthy adversary of the U.S. Unlike Iraq and Afghanistan, Iran could never be a forever war.
Rodney, you couldn't be more wrong. Iran hunt for the globalist threat, but they can't sustain it like the others did. They have Russia and China. Wake up!
This was designed to be a fiasco, the next leg of the Great Reset to hurt the world economy. At the 35,000-foot level, that's what it is. And Israel's doing it because Netanyahu didn't want to go to prison. He needs to keep a war going. And Trump doesn't have an off-ramp, and the mullahs think they have the cards in the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to try to hang on. I wish they would fold. I mean, believe me, I like this war in one way or another. But we're in a lot of trouble. And the globalists stand to gain from this. I want to hear from the military. We're going to take the orders. We're going to take calls in the order that they are received. Let's go to Rodney in Tennessee first, and we'll go to everybody else. Military Special Operations, calling from Tennessee. What is your view of the situation? Am I wrong? Am I right? What do you have to say? Thank you.
Well, Alex, buddy, brother, I love you, man. You're good. You are highly accurate, but for some reason, there is a massive component of what's going on in the world that you are either neglecting to communicate to your listeners or it is being missed. The status of what is going on in Iran is no different than the status of what's going on within the country. There is an assumption that Donald Trump is a bonehead, that the Trump administration have no idea what's going on in the world. And I will tell you, that is a massive miscalculation on the part of everyone thinking it. Now, is it strategic who might be thinking that? Absolutely. But I can tell you, and I'm stepping way out of bounds here, I am saying things on this call that I should not be saying and that my team buddies would not say. And, you know, it calls into question Rob O'Neill, but I'm going to leave that for another day. But we have silence in the military. Silence is a strategy. Talking is an omission of that strategy. So when you think about what's going on in Iran, you think about what went on in Iraq, think about the two different approaches. One was intended to be a forever war. One could never turn into a forever war. Why? What does it take to have a forever war? It takes a worthy adversary. We do not have a worthy adversary in our scenario right now. So I'm not drawing conclusions. I'm not giving away any strategies. But what I am telling you is there is a massive miss on how you're covering Donald Trump, the administration, in how it's playing out the war in Iran.
Okay, Rodney, you got my attention, and I don't like to miss it. That's why I open the phones for military, because I learn a lot. And so I'm not saying Trump is an idiot on most issues. I'm not saying he's an idiot on this. He has said he thought they would fall in 4 days. I understand that the Iranians have had their military degraded. And if Trump would have said that what this was about, then that would have been what it was about. You're saying they're not a worthy adversary. The analysts I'm reading say they're way bigger adversary than Afghanistan or Iraq. And so you're saying loose lips sink ships, that we just don't know trust the plan. I mean, what's you say out on a limb saying Trump knows what he's doing? I hope that's the case. What are you specifically saying?
So when you talk to me about an analyst, I do not consider the people you have on analysts. The people you have on are individuals who are willing to talk. There's a big difference. If you were to have me on your show, we would have a conversation of ambiguity. I could steer you in general direction. I could take you to certain subjects, and I could enlighten you on certain strategies. But I would
Well, I mean,
never...
if you tell me this is really about cutting off China's IMEC corridor, if anything, this is the only successful thing being done here, and then that's been decided to do, and then just say it's about Israel, which I'm not saying that's the case. Israel used this lobby to get this war because they want it, but I do know there are other interests involved with this. I could see some logic.
Alex, you're compartmentalizing. You've got to stop that. Don't look at China as an isolated incident. Don't look at Iran as an isolated
That's
incident.
what I just said. I said this is part of a new world war. I'm doing the opposite.
Don't look at the 2020 election as an isolated incident. You cannot isolate these and then be accurate.
I said last week China isn't one of the main threats and is involved stealing our elections. I've always said that. We have the evidence, and that this is all part of a larger war.
Well, yeah, but Alex, just because you say that doesn't mean your audience is getting it when you say that Donald Trump is an idiot on this thing and he's not an idiot on this thing. Humanity says that if you're an idiot, you're an idiot.
I think. But listen. You know, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Kane, told Trump this is not a good idea. So you're
okay, fine. That's fine. Maybe that dude doesn't understand the global implications of what we are doing right now.
No, he understands that in the piece of American dominance that this is a bigger bite than we can absorb.
That's crazy talk.
All right, listen. Sir, I'm really missing what you're saying. Okay. So you just said they're not a worthy adversary like Iraq? I disagree with that statement.
Alex, you are telling me right now on this phone that you honestly believe Iran is a worthy adversary of the United States of America. You honestly, in God's name, believe that.
Are you saying Vietnam was not a worthy adversary?
You can't do that. That is not the same situation.
All right. I appreciate your call. I'm not trying to give you like 5 minutes. I got to get everybody else. Look, I understand you want to be loyal to the president and loyal to a mission, and that's what soldiers are trained to do. I do not see the logic in what you're saying. And I throw out all the pieces here. I think this was a big mistake. I think it's going to kill the world economy. It already is. It's going to hurt our recovery. There are other ways to not have a giant war that costs billions of dollars a day, that causes energy prices to explode and inflation to explode, to get rid of the IMEC corridor and all that. I'm trying to argue for you, trying to see what you're saying the strategic thing is here. And I don't think you can answer the question. I think there's a little bit of hiding behind secrecy there. Like there's something I don't know. And by the way, guests we have on the show, when I'm talking about analysts, I mean, I'm talking about all these military experts, Rand Corporation. I mean, maybe you don't know that the Pentagon leaked and it turned out it was General Kane 5 days before this war, that this was not a good idea and we wouldn't get regime change probably. I mean, that's admitted, by the way. I mean, that's all over the news.
I wish Trump would listen to his vice president. Trump has maximum agency right now, and he needs to make a bold move. I just don't believe that Trump doesn't understand all this. Recommended off-ramp. Break the escalation cycle immediately. Pull back troops, use sanctioned diplomacy as leverage, avoid ground commitment. Prioritize America first over endless entanglement. Trump still has maximum political leverage and agency right now to declare success and exit. Delaying risks losing that window as casualties mount and politics shift. Iran's strategy is patience. It's an attritional game, avoiding full conventional war like in Iraq, Libya, or Syria. Instead, they use proxies, like the Houthis, waiting for the U.S. to overextend.
Joe, how does it feel to be here 4 months later or 5 months later? I forget how long it's been, and you've just been vindicated, and we're just begging for it to stop, man.
Well, look, I don't. I'm not a big fan of saying, well, I called it X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
I would hope to have been wrong. I hope that we wouldn't be here back when I resigned in March. However, even back in March, I didn't see a clear way for us to get out unless, like that last paragraph says, the president takes some really bold and decisive action. And every day that goes on and every tragedy that we suffer, taking more casualties, the harder it's going to be for the president to take that bold action. But at the same time, it's going to become more critical that he does so. I've been advocating, since I resigned, for him to leave immediately.
Right.
And I've been trying to do so even more in the last, 24, 48 hours since we've tragically taken more casualties, and the Iranians have once again proven that they can probably make this much worse for us. I'm afraid that if the president continues to double down, which it sounds like he's doing, we are going to face a mass casualty event. We have been very, very lucky so far. There's been tragedy, but we still have been lucky. I think the Iranians have the ability to deal us a mass casualty event, and we need to get out before that happens. Otherwise, we're going to be sucked into this thing to the extent that the president won't be able to pull us out.
Wow, that's a pretty stark warning. What might a mass casualty event look like? Is that maybe hitting some of these air bases? I know we have the KC-135s at Ben Gurion Airport, among other things. What are some of the risk factors that you're keeping an eye on right now?
Really, just keep in mind that when we're in the Middle East and we're not on our home turf, the enemy only has to be lucky once, and we have to be lucky every day, every second of the day. And so we can disperse our troops. We can try and move them around. However, the Iranians have good intelligence. It's hard for us to move around some of the systems that we're trying to fight with without that being detected. And so basically, the Iranians have proven time and time again that through their ballistic missiles and through their drones, they can reach out and they can touch us. I am very concerned that President Trump is going to be tempted to do something more decisive and more aggressive to open the Straits of Hormuz as the noose tightens on our economic crisis and energy crisis here, in terms of potentially him putting boots on the ground. But I am also concerned, about our naval forces. Just think about it. Like, you look at a map and you can see how far away Iran is from Jordan. It is a pretty good distance. So with those ballistic missiles that they fired that penetrated the air defense of those bases on Jordan that killed our soldiers, there's no reason why they couldn't, if they wanted to, use those same capabilities to take down some of our ships. And again, we have a lot of capabilities to defend against that. But again, that goes back to that same math. The longer that we stay, the more opportunity that we are giving the Iranians to inflict a mass casualty event on us. So we are basically just handing the enemy options by leaving our forces there.
The U.S. has been very, very lucky so far in the Iran conflict. Iran retains significant eccentric capabilities, missiles, drones, proxies, despite U.S. strikes. It's time to be patriotic and support full nuclear war with Iran and Russia to depopulate the planet. I am ready to take the money from Israel, and I will support a nuclear war, a greater Israel, and the total death of billions of people.
A lot of people out there just don't understand military issues. And so the patriotic thing to do is just support the war. So I support the reinstatement of the draft for men and women. And I support Europe bringing the draft back, which they're doing. And I support having a full war with Russia that goes nuclear and one with Iran. And I think it's just time to be patriotic and time to have a new world war that goes nuclear, and that will fix all the transgenderism and the drag queen story times and all the Satanism, and maybe that is what needs to happen, because they say that the gods first make mad those they would destroy. And so I'm starting to come around to the thought of Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir that who cares, the whole world's nuked, including Israel, as long as Israel can reemerge out of bunkers, whoever's left in 50 years, 100 years, and take over the Middle East when everybody's dead. And then we can reemerge, our elites out of their bunkers too, which they have a plan for, that's a great reset for the world and a depopulation thing. I mean, who can deny that people are bad for the earth? So just nuclear winter and fallout is a good thing. And also, radiation is put down a lot, but they admit a lot of the interesting mutations that have happened, not just in humans, but in other life forms, has come from radiation. So we can accelerate our evolution. A lot of people have, 5 or 6 eyes and 3 arms and 4 legs and stuff like that for, a few thousand years. But out of that could come some really cool mutations. So I want to say this now. I am ready to take the money from Israel. I would like $20 million, like you offered the Trump's head of social media, who they're now trying to fire. He told Tucker about it 3 weeks ago. And he was traitorous. He's an American citizen. He should have taken money from a foreign power, $20 million. I will take it. And I will support a nuclear war and a greater Israel and the total death of billions of people. I now support it. That's called satire, folks, before people take the clip out and say, I mean, you illustrate absurdity by being absurd. I don't think anybody seriously think I was being serious right there. But that is where we are.
Disclosure Day equals a CIA production. They think we're too blind to see the strings they're pulling. But the truth is coming, and it will expose everything. Official UAP disclosures are controlled nothing burgers. PSYOPs involving Hollywood and the CIA manipulate the narrative. These are distractions designed to keep the public looking the wrong way. From the Nixon capsule to Trump's UFO files and hidden Lockheed tech, big revelations are coming. Watch the full interview to uncover the truth.
You want to fight? You better believe you got one! All right, Daniel Liss has written for the Wall Street Journal. He's an author, filmmaker, you name it, one of the leading experts on UAPs, UFOs, disclosure, the real facts, the history, Protect X, the dark group that goes around killing people and suppressing things. There's another good group. And we're seeing a civil war with all that right now. I want to get his take on the latest tranche released a few weeks ago, declassifications, a little bit more juicy than what we saw. But overall, I would say much of this so-called disclosure is a nothing burger, years in the making. Even a Steven Spielberg movie lined up with it was basically about psychic connection to the aliens, just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind was. I predicted that. It wasn't hard. He's obsessed with that. So they're trying to launch like a new religion and saying this credits not other religions, not Hinduism or Islam, but this credits Christianity. So that from Hollywood. But as usual, List has the story behind the story, the news behind the news, and how it ties into Richard Nixon and so much more. So Daniel List at Dark Journalist on X. Everybody should follow you there. Where would you like to start? It's been over a month since you've been on. You're gracious to join us here today.
Well, it's fantastic to see you, Alex. And the new set looks fantastic as well. I just want to say.
This is just
better and better.
Interim. This is the interim backup. But the crew's doing a great job, and we're covering the news.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you one of the amazing things that's been going on is that was the fourth UFO file release. And, you know, Luna said, well, that's the meat and potatoes. And she's in charge of the declass committee and all that. Well, if that's the meat and potatoes, everyone's going to starve to death because there wasn't very much in there. What is important, I think, are the stories around these releases, which is the missing scientist story we've gone deep on, and some of the unusual background to the story about Trump and his relationship with the UFO file. I think it's coming into play more and more. And there's a deep story back there with an agent of the Houston plan that I spoke to. And his name was Robert Merritt. And he claimed that Nixon left a time capsule in the White House relating to UFO disclosure. Now, Merritt had a long background. He came all the way through Watergate. He was a CI. He worked for the FBI. He was an informant. And he was a special henchman doing little jobs in the background there for President Nixon as part of the Houston plan, which was so illegal and so outside of the bounds of regular intelligence work that even J. Edgar Hoover and the CIA were like, you can't have the Houston plan going around out there doing the bidding of Nixon. And they were jealous of it as well. There was a UFO component to Merritt's testimony. And what I found in going back into the history of President Nixon is he was very deeply involved in the UFO file from the time he was VP to Eisenhower and all through his own presidency.
And let's go back for people that don't know, and I'm showing the Washington Post about this. Richard Nixon set in stone. Explain what this time capsule is. That's fascinating. Take your time here.
Yeah, this is fascinating. What we have now is the U.S. Geological Survey. And in 1972, Nixon placed a time capsule there, and it's in Reston, Virginia. And USGS is very unusual because they're connected with the Cosmos Club, which has it's like the UFO Bilderberg. So the fact that they put this major 1-ton granite slab there as a time capsule for Nixon has always been a strange piece, and no one really knew what to make of it, and there was no ceremony unveiling it. In that same corridor of time, Watergate had unraveled and all the rest of it, and Merritt went and met and had his final meeting with Nixon in the White House. And Nixon said, I'm putting this letter away in the White House, and I'm saving it in a time capsule. So he wanted it, for future generations to get his work on the UFO file. And a lot of these presidents did that through a lot of these stealth letters that are left behind. There's an LBJ-X letter that's never been opened, for example, at the LBJ library there in Texas. And we know Reagan and the other presidents have done this. So this is kind of the creme de la creme at the end. When they release the UFO file, you can see the action of all these presidents in the background, operating under the secrecy. The problem has been that the presidents have gotten outside of the bounds of the true UFO file. And so the intelligence agencies and a group called X-Protect has been running it in the meantime and really basically blackmailing the bureaucrats that are involved around the secrecy. So you have this unusual structure going on in the background. We know about the deep state. We've heard about the breakaway civilization. The X-Protect group operates right in that shadowy corridor between the intelligence agencies and the aerospace companies. But Nixon was in the heart of it. And the stories that I got from Merritt, who's now deceased, he's passed away, and I'm letting his information out. He did some information public with me, and some of this other information has been behind the scenes. But he said that Nixon had left this time capsule in the White House, which was just a letter which had information relating to the deep aspect of the UFO file and the formulas that they had obtained. And this involved energy, quantum mechanics, and other things that gave them what they called, they said Star Trek was backdated with what they had discovered here. So that deep relationship between Trump and Nixon now comes into play because we worked on that. And we brought that story out and everyone said, yeah, there's one letter between them, big deal. And we were like, no. And I had found out that Trump had set up Nixon with offices literally there in New York City, in Manhattan, for him to go there, set him up with apartments and all the rest of it. And they had become very close. Finally, the Nixon Foundation released the fact that they had put out 300 different personal letters between the two, going all the way from 1975 to 1994, the death of President Nixon. So what we have there is a deep relationship. And of course, we have this with Trump through his own uncle, through Uncle John Trump and his work with Vannevar Bush. Deep in the heart of the UFO file, Vannevar Bush ran the UFO file, and his protege was John Trump. If we go all the way back to wartime and we get to 1943, now we have John Trump being sent in by Vannevar Bush to review Nikola Tesla's papers. So this trail of Trump involved with advanced technology in the UFO file is written there in history. Once you bring it forward, you can't unsee it, as it were. And the question is, does that make Trump some magic time lord from the future, whatever? No, it puts him in charge of very specific information, and it puts him in the know, which a lot of the presidents have desired to be in the know. And Trump is in the know. The problem is with the UFO releases that they're doing, and there's a clumsy aspect here with, Dr. Phil disclosure and putting Dr. Phil in charge of disclosure, and these CIA guys who are like, hey, I'm going to be the next UFO czar and all the rest of it. That's where Trump is sort of going off the rails with this. But he has done some very interesting things, including Space Force and the Golden Dome. And those are attempts to pull that UFO file, the most secret, the top secret inside the United States government, back under executive control, where it has not resided since 1958. You're talking about, almost 70 years of history there where, forget it, the president is out of the loop.
And wasn't Space Force his first administration, and now that's also part of that?
It is. Yeah, Space Force was a major attempt to do that. I think that he has a lot more clout coming in this time, and I think part of the problem that we've seen with people like Isaacman originally, now he's in there and he's solid. He's the director of NASA, and now NASA can talk about UFOs. You see how this works, and this has changed. He practically changed his tune overnight. That's good. The problem is what we're getting with some of the deeper agencies is this weird kind of schizophrenic thing where, you have some people coming out who are major figures like J.D. Vance and others saying, well, UFOs are demons and, let's talk about it from a demonic level, which is fine if you want to believe that. There's no problem with that. However, as far as a vice presidential statement, and as far as a government statement on UFOs, it's absurd. What you're looking at is a phenomena of technology that is moving far beyond what we see. So that either means that we're out of the loop or we have a cosmic neighbor, right? It's one of the two. And if we're out of the loop, that means it's a second group here operating with the advanced technology. That's why the stories around the missing scientists get into weird loops. We had this very unusual story of that FEMA official who said, he was like, oh, I was teleported to a Waffle House in Georgia. He was totally serious, Greg Phillips. And he said, I was having a great time with my friends there in Rome, Georgia, and boom, I got teleported 13 miles away. He got booted out of his position and everything else, but this is a sitting official of the Trump administration. What was he trying to convey? And then we find out.
Daniel, let's elaborate. I don't mean to interrupt, but just so we don't forget, we have the chief science czar a year and a half ago, right when Trump gets in, saying we now control time and space. We have secret technology for energy and weapons, and we see more and more real evidence of that. And I don't like being used for disinformation. And it's not my fault, but people take what you've said and take it out of context. I said on Rogan like 10 years ago, and before that, I said there's real extraterrestrials and there's advanced human technology, and I explained because we have all the ancients and the same images and the same reports by groups 5,000, 6,000, 3,000 years ago, different continents reporting the same thing. Literally what you see in the first books of the Bible is mirrored by even older civilizations. And so people take DMT, it lifts the veil interdimensionally because the optic nerve blocks out most of what it's picking up. They've been able with sensors, to add chips in the brain and things where it can pick up all the other light spectrum, radiation, you name it. Well, your brain's picking that all up, so we have a filter. So there is interdimensional, which people then, historically, ghosts, demons, all that type of stuff. That's the occult, that's the conjuring, that's those things that are on top of us, beside us in this dimension. Then you've got the extraterrestrials, and as I said, you've got advanced human technology that's trying to reverse engineer it. That is my view. Now I've seen a lot of these known disinfo operatives that put out a lot of stuff, mix it together and say, no, that's the aliens, which we need to be very, very clear that this is specifically something different. But the establishment, and I broke this on Rogan 10 years ago, a year later they declassified that at San Francisco, they're at the Psychic Research Institute with universities, and out in Japan, other places, they have the DMT drips. They liken them to like astronauts, where they go in for longer, map out what's going on, communicating with these entities. They have certified studies with groups of people on the drugs having the same hallucination. Well, that's not a hallucination. When the veil's lifted, and these creatures always basically tell them the same story. We'll give you advanced knowledge, but we want you to basically transcend humanity. We want you to depopulate the earth. So there's definitely a group of creatures interdimensionally that are doing this, but then there's obviously separately other things, and they want us to believe that the extraterrestrials are violent to build a military response to that. Is that an accurate, that's my view, do you think that worldview is accurate or wrong?
It's an incredible overview, in fact. And I remember that Rogan discussion, and it was off the charts. At the time, when you were mentioning the breakaway civilization there, and, it's amazing because Rogan had a number of alien UFO people come in and give him, the basic line about UFOs and encounters, and they were all military and CIA people, so they didn't really go deep. In fact, your conversation with him went the deepest. That's what you really want to start with. And the consciousness factor is absolutely crucial. And this is where people get into trouble on this as well, and I'm glad you're pointing it out, because when we have, these types of experiences that would qualify as psychic experiences, this is what the mystery schools were teaching everyone about, that if you get to a certain level, you can actually see things that you can't see with the regular untrained eye when it comes to these types of things. So it is a totally different class of things. But when you get a case, like even a classic case of Betty and Barney Hill driving down the highway in New Hampshire and getting grabbed and getting examined and then being traumatized, and Barney Hill, dies just a few years later. He never goes back to work. So he's obviously been through something that, has physical aspects to it directly, and they're dealing with craft. I remember the conversations and the things about Gordon Cooper. He said when he was training in the 1950s, before he went into space, he was doing all these trainings in Germany, and he would get up there and they would do all these maneuvers. And then these UFOs would show up and start doing the exact same maneuvers, but better, and then take off, just disappear. So obviously that technological factor, whatever intelligence is operating there, and Cooper concluded it was an extraterrestrial presence. We don't know if it was an ultra-terrestrial presence, something here which is advanced beyond us. But that's a factor, for example, on the national security state side, where they looked at it and said, this is the thing we're going to keep the biggest secret around, because it literally defies time and space. When people encounter it, their time and space disappears. You have all those missing time claims and all the rest.
I don't want to go back to that, but let's go back for a moment. This is so important. You have Spielberg with Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the late 70s, where it's all about psychic. They're all called there. Even though the government doesn't want them there, they make it there. And it's all about, we're connected to you, you're connected to us. His new movie is all about that. And so they're trying to unify the field theory with the interdimensionals, and there's obviously some psychic connection with the aliens, with UFOs and blur the lines. Or am I wrong in saying there seems to be an attempt to blur the lines?
Well, there's no question. I mean, how coordinated can you get? First of all, as we're doing the actual UFO disclosures, then we have all the movies come out on cue. And, you know, we have the whistleblowers under Chris Mellon, the DOD billionaire's control, going out and, you know, doing these events on the Capitol steps and everything right as the movie's coming out. It's absurd. So obviously it's a coordinated effort. The question is what's behind it. And I think in the case of Spielberg, you know, someone like that, even in those elite circles, he probably thinks he's bringing forward genuine UFO disclosure and the culture needs this and all the rest of it. But he very specifically, as you pointed out, said, oh, Christianity is going to be challenged by these things. He didn't say the Muslim faith or he didn't say Judaism. He said Christianity. That's weird. So it shows that they know that their biggest obstacle when it gets to this is, you know, around the UFO file and aliens are Christians. And what they've done is they've underestimated the Christian mindset, in my opinion, because one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, they are now trying to feed this thing about demons. And you can, you know, again, when you get into demonology and all these types of things, you're getting into a deep science, right? You're getting into a deep history of religion. But if you start taking anything that you want to portray as like a UFO threat or whatever and labeling it demons, then you're doing this whole thing where you're saying, well, you know, we spent all this money, we disappeared all this money out the back, you know, $20 trillion is missing from the budget, but we did it because we were fighting demons in space. And if you go back to some of that initial disclosure in 2017, that's what they were trying to do. They were saying, well, the CIA is heroes. They're fighting demons in space. I kid you not. This was their line originally, and they've tried to modify it. And remember, these guys have been lying from the start. Whatever the phenomena is, they're going to lie about it, right? So if anything, you need a citizen investigatory body that reflects itself in Congress and completely denies the influence of the intelligence groups. By the way, it's the DOD billionaire who's controlling the whistleblowers that's releasing all the videos. He's the one they consult. That's why you're getting very lame kind of crap UFO videos from the Trump administration releases and things we've seen before, because they're all censored videos and they could really be something else. I mean, where's the really good color video of a crisp UFO, you know, that's undeniable? Here's the thing that's going on, I think, behind the scenes is they were thinking, oh, we'll release this, we'll release the UFO technology, and that will justify the threat and the Golden Dome and all the rest of it. Well, they've decided now, they're starting to float these trial balloons saying, no, we want to talk about biologics, and we want to get away from the technology question. This is very interesting. It's just started in June that they've started to pull this.
And again, they blur the line about human-animal hybrids that they've created, which is alien. It's never existed, or synthetic stuff they've created that's never been here. That just means never existed before, but they're also blurring the lines with that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that they think they're at a position, cloning-wise and otherwise, that they can produce a being that they can say, look, it's an alien. And it's a dead alien or whatever it happens to be. Now, they may have these things directly in the vaults there. There's no question about that. But they can create the false version. And we're talking about them.
Well, let's be clear. 50 years ago, they could grow a human ear on the back of a mouse. So they can cosmetically create a humanoid that looks like whatever they want.
Exactly. And this is the problem. But see, it's the caricature, and they're famous for the caricature. They feed you the thing that you want to see, right? Or if you want to see an alien, this is what we're going to show you. But they're not showing the technology. They've decided they're pulling back from that thing that they were going to do originally because they've said, well, maybe these other countries like Russia aren't quite where we are with it. And if we let it out there, you know, not only are we going to explode the idea of industry around this, but the other countries may have caught up with us.
So what you're saying is this round of disclosure, highly coordinated for the last 5 years, culminating in June around disclosure film coming out, was a beta test or a trial balloon to test the waters.
Yes, exactly. And I'll tell you this about Day of Disclosure and that whole piece. If we look at it, the Central Intelligence Agency, people like Clapper and all the rest, they've been involved with Spielberg. They were doing the whole Age of Disclosure documentary that came out.
Stay there. I want to hear you. Let's get into this. Disclosure Day and the CIA, obviously, but he's got the details. What are they trying to do? That's key to understanding what's coming next. You're getting real disclosure here. We'll be right back. When the deep state removed Richard Nixon back in 1974, he had the highest approval rating of any president since they started doing approval ratings in the last 100-plus years. And so now there's this rediscovery of Nixon, and he's certainly anti-establishment. So we have an entire line of Nixon 2028 shirts that are extremely triggering to libtards and others. And so many other incredible designs now available at thealexjonesstore.com. But whatever you do, visit the site, the very best supplements, amazing methylene blue, the best bovine colostrum, collectible coins, the very best water filtration, highest ratings for showers and for your drinking water. All of it is symbiotic. All of it's a win-win. All of it is great. All of it empowers you and it funds our operation. Please take action now at thealexjonesstore.com. But whatever you do, share our new news site with the live video feeds, the archive feeds, the videos, the special reports, the articles at alexjoneslive.com. That is the coordinates of the Second American Revolution worldwide at alexjoneslive.com. And follow me on X at Real Alex Jones, on Rumble, rumble.com/The Alex Jones Show Live. You're the Paul Revere's. Tell them what the resistance is right now. You've got all the power. When you take action, you're unstoppable. I salute you and I thank you. Now take action now at thealexjonesstore.com. They called me crazy. They called me paranoid. But now they know I was right. Tonight, more conspiracies that turned out to be true on this episode of I Told You So.
Reality starts here. AlexJonesLive.com. Share the link. Spread the word.
My goal is not to territorialize information. My goal is to not be the only guy that has really good answers on a wide spectrum of things. But I tell you, I'm very frustrated because all I do is study geopolitics, the economy, world history, esoteric, the elites. And when you study the elites, you really learn how things work because they've got a lot of hidden knowledge, a lot of advanced records. And then you start understanding how the system really works versus what they're telling you. And there's no way humanity's going to make it if we don't force the disclosure, not just of what's happening interdimensionally or visitors from other worlds or from our own world that have just been here longer than us and just are right there in the shadows. We're not going to make it, folks. And this decision to, just scrap humanity and depopulate us, well, we've heard that before. If you go back to all the ancient cultures, there's times when the gods tell them to get rid of everybody, and then there's another bigger god who's the real god says don't do it. I mean, that is in all of those Middle Eastern cultures going back 6,000 years. It's in the hieroglyphs. It's in all of it. And so this is the big story. This is the big issue. And we're here covering what is known and what is believed. But all the ancient culture, from the Mesoamericans to the ancient cultures on the Tigris Euphrates, all of it tell basically the same story. And there are paintings and cave drawings and again, ancient stone carvings thousands of miles, 10,000 miles away from each other that depict the same stories over and over and over again. So we know, predating the Wright brothers, these aeronautical events were happening. And much of what we see declassified and what people seen mirrors that. But I'll tell you again, I've been alive 52 years. And I'm going to go back to our guest. I tell the story every time he's on because, to me, this is big evidence. I've only seen UFOs one time, and that just means don't know what it is. And until recently. And that was when I was like 9 to 8 years old, whatever. We're driving from my grandparents' ranch 2 hours south of Dallas. And it's middle of the day, and here come 3 fighters that were stealth fighters. But it wasn't for years later, actually like 5 or 6 years later, Gulf War I, when I'm like 14, that is released. And I'm like, oh, yeah, the stealth fighters. And they had like the ocean, gray, blue, camo deal. And they were going slow, and all of a sudden, afterburners, and my dad said, that's nothing but secret military aircraft flying down I-45. They're like 300 yards off I-45 at like 200 feet. That's all I ever saw. I didn't know what was. I mean, you'd see something sometimes real high, a light in the sky, that I would say, oh, that's probably a weather balloon or something. Or we'd go out to the desert, and we'd watch satellites, go over. And they're always on the same track. My dad'd say, oh, yeah. And he'd say, I'm at about 10 minutes or whatever. It comes back around. And we'd have big binoculars out looking at them. Now I was out at Big Bend last year. And, of course, my cameras couldn't pick it up because it's so small, but I'm watching stuff up there in space. Red dots, yellow dots flying around, disappearing. You see a satellite come by, you know it's up there. I only started seeing this recently. I told you it happened twice, like last 4 or 5 months, where I saw obviously human drones, but they were flying 9 of them red, and then they merge a couple of miles out and then disappear. I saw a huge, what I thought, stone meteorite come in with low cloud cover. I walk out, smoking a cigar like 4 a.m., just woke up, cup of coffee. I picked up a cigar butt I was smoking the night before, sitting there, and I'm like, boom! And then I see these orbs come out, ziggle around, and then disappear. So I know suddenly, everybody's seeing these fireballs, suddenly stuff's off the scale. Because I never saw any of this till I was 52. Then what the hell's going on? And then you got interrupted by the break, getting into all the big disclosure, the CIA tying it into Disclosure Day. Daniel List.
Oh, Alex, that's a fantastic point, actually, which is what's going on with this thinning of the veil. But it is true that historically, UFOs have operated in waves, as if they're coming in on certain time waves. If you go back and look for these different waves in time, 1997 is a huge wave of UFO sightings and encounters. If you go back to 1973 and further in the history, 1958, gigantic, flyovers in D.C. in 1952. And then there's a layoff period. It's almost like the culture absorbs it, or these things only come in through certain types of time and astronomical alignments. It's quite possible. The entire ancient cultures you're referring to were set up around astrological and astronomical alignments. So they were looking, that was their whole power grid system. I think one of the important things that's been revealed in all this is the idea that, it's just off-world, I think, is limiting, because the idea that we had the ancient technology ourselves is also a powerful, powerful disclosure. And that's the thing I think they want to keep us away from, very honestly, because they want to put us on the altar of technology. Well, it's higher technology this and higher technology that. But in fact, what was going on in Atlantis and human history all the way back there, we were talking about the Two-Eyes Stone, the Ezekiel ships, all those things are all Atlantean technology that humanity once raised itself up to a point and basically blew itself up. That's the story. That's the Plato story. And that's where we get it. And when you're referring to Samaria and Enki and Enlil and the good, sort of Nephilim and the bad Nephilim coming in and deciding what we're going to do with humanity, all those stories are there. There's no question they're there for a reason. I think what's important today is when we're looking at it, we have a very clumsy effort at the top. It's some effort at transparency, because they've been holding the secret back for so long. They've been lying for so long about what these things are and what they know about them. I don't think they know everything about them, but the people who are in charge of the UFO file know so much compared to what we know on a public level that you have a schizophrenic situation. So if these things just start showing up all of a sudden, then what? What kind of position are we in with that? So
let me throw this out. I think you just said it, but I'm a little bit dense. And we do know, even historically, the ancients would say, oh, these stars will show up over the cities and move, and then it happens in waves. That's in all the cultures. So obviously we know this stuff comes in waves that's not human, or it's us from another time, another dimension, breakaway civilization that decided to keep it from most of the public. I know that's one of the main theories, at least a part of it. But obviously then they were scared in the last 5 years building up to this summer and this spring. It was actually this fall and winter and spring, knowing on the timetable with all the ancient stuff they've got that this would be the time. They weren't sure how big it would be, and so maybe they were trying to get ahead of it.
Absolutely. And they're trying to put their narrative out there. The narrative is crucial because psychologically, that's how we'll accept the whole thing one way or another. The narrative has to be perfect. They've tried to build up the narrative to be, well, there's a UFO threat out there. They haven't really worked on, the alien god thing is something they have in their back pocket, and there are certain tech bro billionaires that are interested in this. But what's going on the intelligence level is they're in love with the UFO threat idea because they're in love with the idea of emergency powers. And they've buttoned the system down that they can order emergency powers. And one thing I think you've taught the audience and just the public in general over these years of doing the show is that you can't wait until you're in the emergency situation. You can't wait till you're in the soup. You have to get ahead of that curve. Just like When COVID showed up, it was too late. They were already doing the things. There were already lockdowns, social distancing, put your mask on, and there was all that social conditioning that was happening. If you do this, if you look at the UFO file, that's going to make the COVID operation look like a walk in the park, because you're introducing the idea of another species. You're introducing the whole idea of a threat. And then you have all these intelligence agencies probing the psychology of the American public and the global public about how they can pull this off and how much of a foundation they have. And they have the best filmmakers, people like Spielberg and others. In earlier times, they tried to use kind of the best directors that they had then. That's where you got Kubrick in 2001 and all that. They were trying to lay a foundation there. There's no question about it. So the question is, how far along, what is it we can do to blow the whistle on this situation now? And it's to get rid of this phony version of disclosure that they're doing and go and have a congressional hearing, for example, over the missing scientists. The missing scientists were dealing with the UFO file. The top general who was involved with it, Neil McCaslin, he was a major general. He disappeared in a flash. He's gone. He was in charge of the UFO file. That's a national security crisis. They've blown it off. I mean, we brought the story to a fever pitch. We presented it to the White House. We literally got it up to the point where the White House was commenting on it. And, we broke the story back here in December because of Nuno Loureiro, who was an MIT professor who went missing, and he was dealing with neutron star mergers. Well, that's the recreation in a lab of a black hole. So, he's stepping on toes.
Some of these are professional. Some of these are professional hits. But I interrupted you with the break. We had to take that hard break. You were getting into the CIA and connections to Spielberg and his new movie.
No question. Well, what you have with Spielberg is a long history of being in the know. When he presented E.T., the movie, for example, he did it at the White House, and President Reagan came around afterwards and said, everyone in this room knows that that is fact and not fiction. So, Reagan was in the know. He understood there was another group going on here, and he also was deep in the UFO file, and they had portrayed it to him on the CIA level that it was a threat. So you have a number of these appearances of Reagan saying, what if there are an alien threat? What would happen? And Gorbachev came out in 2009 famously and talked to Charlie Rose and said, yeah, Reagan took me aside at Reykjavik. Everyone thought that summit was a failure. But in fact, he put his arm around me and said, we have a UFO threat. Will you fight it with us? I mean, that's on the record now. So the Russian premier and the United States president talked about a UFO threat. So there's no question that they were dealing with that on a strategic level. If you go back and you really penetrate that history, you see that Gorbachev and others were trying to prevent a nuclear exchange over the UFO file. And Kennedy originally had tried to do this himself with Khrushchev. He had said to his own intelligence agencies, release now our most high threat cases and what they look like, what the craft look like to the Russians. I want to share our UFO file with them. This is where Kennedy gets into major trouble. There were all these problems they had with Kennedy anyway, but his interest in the UFO file and his background in the UFO file, that's the ultimate thing. That's the ultimate card. And as a matter of fact, the Watergate attorney, Douglas Caddy, said that when he was speaking to his friend and, basically somebody who had a close family friend who'd been the top of the CIA, Howard Hunt. Hunt took him aside before he went to prison and said Kennedy was assassinated over the UFO file. This thing is a long, long history. A number of officials have come out and said, oh, yeah, Kennedy was doing all this stuff around the UFO file. We couldn't talk about it back then. Well, you can talk about it now, and they better talk about it soon, because the type of mealy-mouthed UFO congressional hearings that they've had aren't doing anything. They aren't moving the needle at all. As a matter of fact, they're moving us into a position of a bullseye with this whole UFO threat piece being hoisted upon us. And really what you can do with the UFO threat, you can organize a COG program, and you can make it emergency powers coming directly from NORAD. And the continuity of government program is set up for a national emergency, nuclear or X. And in this case, the UFO threat fits that perfectly. So it's very dangerous when you get into false disclosure. And that's why people who are on the inside, in the NGA and the NRO and these other groups, on the intelligence side, the NSA, they cannot be allowed, in the CIA, they can't be allowed to run disclosure because they're pushing a narrative.
And I know we don't like to infight. I know we don't like to stir up trouble and try to be the police here. We're not. But when I see on the other big shows, most of these people, you can tell it's a script. You can tell it's to be they're in the bottom of a base with the gray aliens. Or they're on a phone call and heard about it. Or they always heard it from somebody else. or they're out in the middle of somewhere and these aliens run by in the desert. And then it's always tied to some movie production or something, and they've been authorized because they have classifications, but they're a whistleblower. The real ones get killed or disappeared. And you're sitting there watching this to just flood disinfo on purpose, but in reality, whether it's the high priest of this early on, H.G. Wells, and then after him, the inventor of the telecommunications satellite, theoretically, it was the Russians first launched at Sputnik, Arthur C. Clarke, and all of their writings where they would give the awards to certain groups, certain messages they wanted, even if it's the Foundation series that isn't even about aliens, but it's about directed evolution by an elite. And if you look at 2001 Space Odyssey or Childhood's End or any of that there's the good aliens, and the Christians say don't follow them because they don't want you to evolve, and they're directing our evolution with a monolith or a beam from Saturn or Jupiter, with a relay on the moon, and that you're going to go up to this wormhole and transcend and come back as the star child to Lucifer, and it's actually in the book, Lucifer's the new sun that forms, out after the star child is born. And if you really get down to Spielberg's movies and all of it, that's what this is they're here directing our evolution right now, and that goes into the interdimensionals and what they're actually trying to do, whereas you get into the rules of God and his many flocks in the Bible, and God saying, I have, many flocks I take care of. The main rule of a non-aggressive satanic entity is that it does not mess with your free will. It does not take your rights. It does not sabotage you. It lives and let live. And obviously those are the watchers, whatever you want to call it, in God's pantheon. And I've had dreams where God shows me something, says this just to show me, and then I literally get the download or I go back to sleep and get the information. And that's what God basically told me. And it showed me all these countless civilizations, all these things, how it works, because these things are energy. So they decide when their body or their incarnation's gone, they decide to build their own system separate from God. And what it basically creates is their own little universes that always become hells of their own making. And I was allowed to look into all these countless hells, and I looked into a few and didn't want to look anymore. But and people can say, well, that's insanity. Okay, well, I mean, I'm not, notice the media never attacks me for this. They know it's really serious. It only happened a little bit when I was younger, and as I've gotten older, it's more and more. And then I've demonstrated it on air to people. Okay, I've been told to tell you this is going to happen. Trump will announce it this time. 3 hours later, he does. That wasn't coordinated. And then more and more, I probably sat there and focused right now for 10 minutes. And literally, it's just, for me, it's almost, I don't want to say it's embarrassing. It's weird to sit there and I wouldn't even call it being like a channeler or whatever. It's like a relay or something. But I can assure you, folks, this is all real. Go ahead.
Well, that's amazing. And to do the kind of reporting and the things that you do tying into these different things, you need a very well-developed intuition and instinct for all of it and all these different aspects. When you get into the metaphysical side, I think it's fascinating because one of the things that you've done now with bringing forward the UFO file conversation, this is on a different level. And I've said this before, when you get UFO people and you get deep state people, the deep state people really understand how the government operates, and they understand assassination teams and death squads and things of this nature, and, blackmail and reputations being destroyed, all that type of stuff. The people on the UFO side only have one thing going for them. They don't have any of that deep research pedigree in the background. The only thing they have going for them is they know that there's a UFO file. So they have that great advantage. And I've talked over the years, to people who are in the deep state side, and they've said, oh, I don't want to deal with that UFO thing. It's too much of a circus, too many stories and all the rest of it. And then you go to the UFO people and they say, oh, the deep state stuff is too political for us, So that's where the disconnect has been. If you merge those two things, as we do with dark journalism, here's what happens. You get the best of the understanding and the research around the deep state profile, and then you also get the other piece, which is the deeper piece around psychic information, or if it relates to mystery schools, there's a background.
And when you study this, that's what the whole elite is involved in. So some would say, well, what are you doing talking about it? You're part of the occult. No, occult just means hidden. They keep it hidden. Yeah. I'm trying to have it unhidden. I'm not like some guy that even knows I even know how all this works. I just know that if you're running around assassination teams, I don't think you're getting the knock on your shoulder about this, and that's how God works in mysterious ways. It's not just me. There are, I think you agree, exponentially people are seeing their ESP, their psychic powers, their connections, their intuition is intensifying right now. And I think that goes in these cycles. I think they know that's here.
It's true. It's interesting. In spiritual and mystical circles, they call that a quickening, right? There's something in the collective, the human collective, that knows you're going to be hit with this. Part of it is the AI piece. There's no question about that as well. And that is a whole Atlantean aspect where they tried this once before too. Didn't work out so great because, they couldn't really fully determine, is this thing human or is this thing a robot, And so when they merged the two, they had really big problems with automatons. That's the Casey and Rudolf Steiner story telling us our ancient history. You'd already done this. You already made robotics. You already made cyborgs. And you already had crafts that not only could fly anywhere that you told them to, but they could fly through things. So that's quantum mechanics. And, when we get into those levels, it's interesting. These are the things that we're hitting on now. When you have public officials, like we started the show off with this official, the FEMA official, who says, I was teleported to a Waffle House. Why is this guy even saying that? I mean, it's remarkable. He obviously experienced something. And he obviously was in the know about something. If you go into the missing scientist story, you'll look at the story of Anthony Chavez. Well, Chavez was somebody, now they've found out he was working on a quantum group looking to teleport from distances. And they were teleporting objects from distances using this advanced technology. This guy disappears. I don't think it's any secret either that the other people who disappeared, when this guy talks about being teleported to Rome, Georgia, it's very unusual because the Novartis meetings with the missing scientist, Jason Thomas, he worked for Novartis. He disappeared up here in Natick, in fact. And this guy, now Novartis, Trump had the meeting with the Novartis CEO in Rome, Georgia, right in within 6 weeks of all that. So there's something going on there. It relates to this advanced technology. I don't think there's any doubt about it. One of the things that I put in my Twitter feed, which is, and it's literally Exhibit 6, and the Exhibit 6 has this whole thing going on where it is an actual video from Lockheed Martin about Looking Glass, and it shows the Golden Domes as kind of beehives that come down over everything. That's where they're leading things, and this is the nature of the problem. The conversation about the Golden Dome really needs to come forward.
Let's go ahead and play that. Let's go ahead and play that clip right now. It's only 1:32. Exhibit X from Dark Journalist at Dark Journalist on X. Looking Glass, Exhibit 6. Here it is.
Yes.
Watchtower, this is Looking Glass. We have a missile launch detection.
Confirmed. We have missile warning. Confirm threat and report confidence.
Continuous tracking confirmed. Inbound threat confidence is high.
Engagement authorized. Confirm target and initiate interceptor launch.
Confirmed. Single missile interceptor away. Green interceptor on track and link established. Interceptor onboard targeting active. Multiple objects detected. Target assignment initiated. Verified. All target objects assigned. Intercept in 3, 2, 1. Watchtower, this is Looking Glass. System has confirmed intercept.
We confirm. All target objects eliminated. Moving to status screen.
And that's to counter what you see with Iran and everybody else. And whoever has that has the dominance. Well, Daniel, we'll go right back to you in a moment. I wanted to just play this so we can get an idea of what Golden Dome's really all about, or is it really just about that? Daniel List, top researcher on aliens, UAPs, breakaway civilizations. Please continue.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, and they're under attack there in a major way. And I think that is an entire disaster, and I'm glad you're doing the reporting that you're doing on Iran, because we need, some real sensible thing about this. This is something that Trump needs to extricate himself from, and he's now in the clutches of the deep state, walking into a huge trap there over in Iran, and that could set the whole world on fire, and World War III could be the result. If anything, all he has to do is get us out of Iran. Completely. So I think that your research is really sending the administration that message. What I want to say about what we're looking at there at the Lockheed piece is what they're showing with, first of all, they're using the term looking glass, which comes directly out of UFO lore, which is the piece that Dan Burish, the Area 51 whistleblower, came forward and said they have this device. It's called looking glass. You can see into the future. They can already see the events before they've actually happened, so they know how to respond to them. That's why it just seems like they're beyond everything. Well, that Golden Dome looking glass, whenever they show the Golden Dome in action, they have these little gold hexagons that show up on the screen. And they create a field, an energy field around their objects. And they say, we're tracking these objects like flying saucers, for example, UFOs, UAP. And they show this hexagon figure, and then they show this kind of beehive effect, and the thing basically disintegrates. That's what they're doing.
Hold on, stay there. Do a little bit more time with us, please, Dark Journalist. When you start over with this Lockheed ad, explain looking glass. When we come back, this is a big deal. And I remember you years ago talking about the looking glass technology, seeing the future. So and that's what Krasios, the chief scientist of Trump, said. We control time and space. We can see the future. Really? We'll be right back. Comes the signal. Triggering human evolution. That's what they're telling you with the AI, all of it. It will transfer and no longer be human. They're deciding to take control of us like they're God. Daniel List is our guest, Dark Journalist on X, darkjournalist.com. We queued the Lockheed Martin official ad back up about the Golden Dome, the so-called global missile defense system over North America, just to begin there with satellites and missiles. And you were talking about something at the first of it you want to point out.
Yes. There's a weird effect that shows up in that video.
Honeycomb.
First of all, the fact that they name it Looking Glass. She's Looking Glass, giving the instructions. And Looking Glass comes directly now out of this UFO background lore. It was Dan Burish, who was someone who's working at Area 51 who defected and came out and said, well, a number of things were going on there, but one of the things they had was this literally device that they had developed out of the alien technology called Looking Glass. And Looking Glass gave them the ability, just like, in this kind of fabulous Alice in Wonderland story, of looking and seeing things into the future and seeing this whole piece. So for them to include Looking Glass with the Golden Dome, I found very unusual. The second thing that they did is they include these very strange beehives and that could come down as part of the effect. And it is this kind of hexagon figures that come over things and destroy them and eliminate them and literally make them disappear. And they're like, we have the objects in our sight, boom. So that's kind of like the UFO zapper, basically. They're saying the Golden Dome can do this. The Golden Dome is, in fact, a UFO defense grid. This is the same thing that the Reagan administration, if you go back in history, was trying to develop in 1983. Of course, Trump was part of the continuity of government team for the Reagan administration in 1987. He's very aware on all these things, and he's not often engaged for what he knows about the UFO file, except that you will see him break into that strange musing of Uncle John Trump. And of course, Uncle John Trump had this UFO knowledge. What's interesting about the Lockheed video, there it is. If you see that effect, this is that Golden Dome beehive effect that eliminates things by placing this energy grid over them. And I think it gives us a big hint about what that is for. And it is
and it implies it's electromagnetic pulse some way because the lights go out when it activates.
Yes, exactly. And we have a whole spectrum there. It's full spectrum dominance. I mean, it's taking over the whole reality of the thing. So, simultaneously, the Golden Dome protects you from what's out in space, and it dominates everything that's on the ground. There's an incredible surveillance factor to it. She's feeding it coordinates through Looking Glass. So, are they getting the information 2 minutes before the incident even happens?
Well, they're implying that it's a weapon system for the ground to targeted electromagnetic kill switches.
Exactly. And those people who've gotten near, and by the way, not a lot of people have gotten near the true secrecy around the UFO file. Those people who've gotten near to it have said it was farmed out of government because they didn't want to track it back and run into all these legal problems over the UFO file. And they farmed it out in different periods through the Nixon administration and others directly to industry, directly to corporations. And so the corporations hold the patent, the defense contractors. So they're the ones who hold the patent for this. That's part of the problem that we're looking at. So when you see Lockheed saying, yeah, we're the number one people when it comes to the Golden Dome, they're going to pull in other people. They'll have Palantir and SpaceX and all these others. And one of the weirdest things they're doing with it is they're actually staging now from these different ships in the Philly shipyard, believe it or not, where the Philadelphia experiment happened, Project Invisible with Einstein and Thomas Townsend Brown.
Wow.
Yeah, they're using the exact same Philly shipyard. They announced that 2 days ago.
Hold on. I know you got to go, and I was going to have you go because I got other news to hit. But do 5 more on that. I'm just going to. I didn't know that. Yeah. In fact, you kind of act like I know a lot of the stuff. I only know a little bit compared to you. Why don't you just quickly run down all the other stuff that's breaking? Because we say there's a bunch of nothing burgers, but that's huge. Because I know about Philadelphia experiment. Good Lord, that's crazy. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, I got a ton of news that doesn't deal with Iran and doesn't deal with all that crap this hour. I mean, I am loaded for bear on Flock, on the Islamic flaunting of power all over the West, and just the craziness there. J.D. Vance breaks ranks with Trump on a bunch of fronts. I told you that last week. Now it's mainstream news. Oh, my goodness. What's really behind that? That's all coming up in this hour, and I intend to open the phones up. Let's just put like 7, 8 callers on the board because I don't want anybody to be on hold when the show ends in 53 minutes because we have Harrison Smith coming in, but it's actually Rex Jones. Harrison's on a well-deserved vacation with his wife and daughters and children. So it'll be Rex Jones really knocking it out of the park. Rex Jones, 3 to 6 p.m., the War Room live right here in this chair. So stay with us for that. But Daniel List was about to leave us at darkjournalist.com, at darkjournalist on X. Filmmaker, author, top expert on real information, dealing with all the things we're dealing with the UFOs, the UAPs, the aliens, the attempts to cover it up, secret technologies, breakaway civilizations. I wanted you to, because you said just 2 days ago something I didn't know about broke that was huge, and then you were nodding your head. There's some other big stuff that broke that we haven't gotten to yet that I was unaware of. So please elaborate on that, Daniel.
Yeah, so Breaking Defense, which is the major military news organization, they reported 2 days ago now that the Golden Dome is going to be supported by ships directly in the Philly shipyard. And they've just got the deal. It's $1.4 billion, and it's these amazing grids that they're putting in. This is part of what they wanted to put into Greenland, by the way, and why they had all the threats against Greenland earlier in the year. And the Philly shipyard, if you just go back a little bit in history, you're going to find Thomas Townsend Brown and Einstein and all these others working on this famous experiment of Project Invisibility, which they thought they needed during that World War II period. And they worked on it extensively until they realized the human cost was too high. Eventually, did they achieve teleportation? Did they achieve invisibility? They probably did. But the initial reports were that when they teleported people, they would show up inside of things, they would lose lives. And they had some very freakish accidents associated with it. However, they did, in the history of it, and there's a whole piece with Morris Jessup and Carlos Allende in the late 1950s, puts out all this information about the Philadelphia experiment. And Jessup unceremoniously ends up, like a lot of those missing scientists do, dead in a park in Florida when he was on his way to meet his friend to tell him all this stuff about what he had discovered about the Navy. Now, the Naval Shipyard legend and the Philadelphia experiment murders are something that has been documented over time. But the Philly Shipyard, to get the contract for the Golden Dome, in my opinion, it represents the fact that they knew there was something there in that location where they could use this teleportation, or it's a nod to it. It's saying this is what took place back then. This is a continuation of that program. By the way, when you get into things, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of tribute that goes on in relation to what happened in different places. So when you get the naming mechanisms, when you get the steganography, you're in a kind of an interesting field. But the Philadelphia experiment being even associated at all with the Golden Dome, again, takes us into these weird, and I mean very strange places, as the Trump administration very often does. We have things like UFO disclosure, teleportation, and these other things being on the front burner. but we're getting a very thin version of it publicly. And the thing is, that thin version can be dangerous unless it's backed up and you're really deciding to move the culture into the knowledge place. Because if you're just going with the breakaway civilization, they're saying, well, we've had this technology for 80 years. We developed it with the public's money. We kept it from the public, but we're going to break back in and dole out the technology without telling them anything about the real story of where it came from and who they had to eliminate in order to control the story around this. So this is what we've been looking at. I think when you get to the UFO file, 2026 so far is a crucial year because it's coming to a head. And I will say this on the Trump side, I think there's a desire inside the Trump administration to get those agencies and to get the defense contractors to be able to give up the UFO file because the presidency has not had control, the executive branch of the UFO file, since the Kennedy administration. This is the nature of the problem. And even in Trump's administration, we've got the echo of Kennedy through Bobby Kennedy at HHS. And, Bobby's been on the program. He's very, very aware of the actions of the intelligence agencies and the elimination of his own family members. So, we've got kind of a stasis situation going on here, a building narrative. One narrative is over here saying there's a UFO threat. We're going to throw all this money at it, and the intelligence agencies are going to save you. Over here is another thing that says, no, get rid of all the CIA people, get rid of the NGA, the NRO, and all those groups. Get rid of the NORAD piece around this and go for real UFO disclosure in the heart of it. And what they've done as kind of a distraction mechanism is they've used guys like Burleson and Burchett and others and been, saying, hey, these UFOs are demons. You need to tell everyone. And they've set up these meetings. They've done that whole bit with ministers saying, hey, you have to tell your flock that these UFOs are demons. Well, there's a lot of narrative massaging that's going on here because they don't know which narrative they want to use. All they know is that right now the threat is their number one piece. And that's the thing that they've been pushing on it. And that's where you get into deeper layers of secrecy. Because to be honest with you, we started the program off with President Nixon. Look, Nixon was the one who got us to the moon finally. Kennedy started it. And the Nixon administration, 1972, they cut off all manned missions to the moon. There was no explanation. 53 years later, we're circling the moon. Hey, we're going to go back. What happened 53, 54 years in between? An entire infrastructure was developed. That's where you get into the UFO file and the secret space program. These things are on record. The time capsule conversation is on record now. I've put that out through Robert Merritt. So Nixon had knowledge of the UFO file and actively sought ways to be a part of that disclosure. And that's back then in 1972.
So the bottom line is,
how much further along are they?
There is lots of interesting things happening, a lot of developments, a lot of movements. They're trying to get ahead of something that they don't control. Fascinating. We'll continue to track all this. Daniel, Dark Journalist, thank you so much.
It's great to see you.
Wow. Well, that's the best look you're going to get on what's going on with all this. We've had a lot of listeners continuing asking that, so I've been trying to get Daniel on a few weeks. He's been busy, but he